There's going to be a Supreme Court showdown over the president's health care bill in the middle of the presidential campaign next year. That is the likely result of today's decision by the Justice Department to skip a step in the federal fight over the president's Affordable Care Act. The Obama Justice Department has asked the Supreme Court to bypass a possible delaying stage of the appeals process and hear the cases challenging the health care reform law as soon as possible. In August, a federal court of appeals in Georgia ruled that the individual mandate in the law is unconstitutional. There are several other cases working their way through the federal courts, but this is the one. The Obama Justice Department has decided to push to a Supreme Court argument, likely with a decision to be written in the spring of 2012, probably around June, just when the Republican attacks on what they call Obamacare will be reaching a fever pitch. Joining me now is Washington Post columnist and MSNBC contributor E.J. Dionne. Thanks for joining me tonight, E.J.
Good to be with you, Lawrence.
E.J., do we have a campaign precedent like this where basically in the middle of a presidential campaign, here comes the United States Supreme Court to decide what may be the constitutionality of the central issue of that campaign?
I can't think of one. There may be somebody out there who can. I mean, the closest thing I can think of was the Dred Scott decision, which laid the predicate for the 1860 election, but that was 3 years before. But I really like the fact that they did it this way. They could have gone through the 11th Circuit. There was no guarantee, by the way, that they would have done the full review. They would have subjected themselves to criticism that they were playing games, trying to delay it. I think this shows real confidence that they can win. And while I am always skeptical that this Supreme Court is going to engage in judicial activism, there may be reason to think they won't this time. Two reasons. One is this would be a way to start a huge fight over the nature of the court, and I'm not sure the conservatives on the court want to do that. Secondly, we talk about the 11th Circuit decision. There was a 6th Circuit decision in favor of the health care bill. It was written by a very conservative judge called Jeffrey Sutton, who is very respected by people like Justice Scalia. And he had an interesting line in that decision. He said, not every intrusive law is an unconstitutionally intrusive law. And it was basically telling conservatives, don't have the courts do your political work for you. That's what conservatives are supposed to say.
How do you suppose the Mitt Romney camp feels about this right now? Here is the individual mandate going to the Supreme Court during the presidential campaign, the individual mandate that is virtually identical to the one Romney supported in Massachusetts and made law in Massachusetts.
I think anything that puts health care at the center of the discussion in the Republican primary is bad for Mitt Romney. I think it's notable, for example, that when he went after Rick Perry for being out of the mainstream, he didn't say anything about Medicare because he didn't want to talk about health care at all. He went after him on Social Security. I think it was smart. It's clearly been effective. But I think he would like health care to go away as an issue until the general election.
And, E.J., the Supreme Court, understandably, has a way of settling things. They reach a decision, and then that's it. At least that's it legislatively. No one tries to make any real moves after that. But this decision is going to be made right in the middle of a presidential campaign where one campaign, the Republican campaign, is going to say if the court doesn't rule it unconstitutional, the Republican candidate is going to say repeal it. I mean, even Romney's position is repeal it, get rid of it, throw it out. And so the decision, which is likely to be 5-4 one way or the other, you can see where it's going to be in a certain way the beginning of the campaign argument in what is the final stretch of the campaign.
And this decision could be as much sausage making as the making of this bill itself, because they wouldn't necessarily have to throw out the entire law if they ruled against it. They might just throw out the individual mandate, keep the rest of the law in place. And there are ways potentially to make it work without the mandate. Paul Starr, a healthcare expert at Princeton, has an interesting idea about how you could make it work without a mandate. So they could go in a lot of directions. They could throw it all out, or they could just throw throw out the mandate, in which case you then have a very complicated discussion going all the way through the election.
And the mandate, I've pointed out before, is something of a mirage since it doesn't really have a penalty attached to it. There's this very low dollar penalty written into the tax code, which the IRS is specifically forbidden from trying to collect either through civil or criminal process if you refuse to pay it. So there's this really funny mirage quality to this mandate to begin with, the thing that they're fighting over so intently. And I think the Obama team knows that if they lose the mandate, they still have the essence of their bill, and they will be ready to go forward with it without the mandate.
Right. It's hard to make it work without something to replace the mandate, but I think it's going to be it ought to be really hard to throw this out on constitutional grounds. I mean, this is done on the basis of the Commerce Clause regulating interstate commerce. I mean, are there any mom and pop insurance companies out there? I mean, we are talking about a truly national industry. And what's this about? It's actually a conservative idea, the mandate. We are all going to go into hospitals in an emergency to be cared for. The hospitals have to take care of us by law. Somebody is going to pay. This is an effort to rationalize it and to prevent free riding, which is, again, something Republicans ought to be for.
And, E.J., you and I have been around this argument long enough to know that the individual mandate began as a Republican idea.
Exactly right.
E.J. Dionne,
you should get into the Republican race for president. Why not? Anybody can enter.
That's right. E.J. Dionne, thank you very much for joining me tonight.
Good to be with you.